Pepsi, an African American, former congressman and agricultural secretary, running against Cindy Hyde Smith, a white supremacist,
Yes.
for lack of a better term,
Yes.
a proud supporter and apologist for the Confederacy, who actually said about one of her supporters, if he invited me to a public hanging, I'll be on the front row. This is what she
What?
said. And let me just give you some additional notes on her
Yes.
resume. Now, she attended a segregated high school because Mississippi did not want to fall in line with everyone else with desegregation.
Right.
And that may not be her fault because, her parents sent her to the school. But she turns around and sends her daughter to a similar school.
Exactly.
Right? And then she praised Jefferson Davis, Candy, the former president of the Confederacy, proudly wore Confederate
As a matter of fact,
gear.
she wanted a street to be named after him.
You got it. Now that was part of her resume. One, I see you.
right,
You're on top of it.
How
Right, a
old is this
highway,
lady? Is she old?
She should know better. So, and here's the thing. And let's just put some perspective here. Mississippi was the last state to ratify the 13th Amendment, which of course abolished slavery. Now, that happened in 1865. They didn't ratify it until March of 1995, 148 years later. So this is what we're dealing with that state and with this particular person. Now, so the race today will come down to black voter turnout, and because only 15% of whites voted for Epstein in the last election,
Right.
the general election. So now this is the runoff, and 38% of Mississippi's population is African American. So we'll see. Now, here's something interesting. I think all you find this interesting. Charles Evers, the 96-year-old brother of Medgar Evers, who was assassinated back in June of '63 during the Civil Rights era. He's a Republican, and he's supporting Cindy Hyde Smith
Wow.
for senator. So some Negroes you just got to write off. I'm just
Yeah,
going to put
you
it out
do.
there just like that. I've written off quite a few over the years.
Yes, you
and
have.
yes, I have, and will continue to do so because not everyone is down with the cause, so to speak. And Juan, I know you wanted me to talk a little bit about that criminal reform bill that's
Yes.
coming out. Yeah,
Yes,
it's called the First Step Act. This
Right.
is something that the Trump administration is pushing. It had overwhelming support back in May 2018, so they're trying to get it through the Senate, and he, of course, will sign the bill. So it's supposed to promote prisoner participation in vocational training, educational coursework, or faith-based programs, and in turn help prisoners or inmates successfully re-enter society. Prisoners will be able to earn credits that reduce the amount of time spent in prison. It also gives judges some discretion over mandatory sentencing. So this bill, and there's some other aspects to the bill, but the bill is only going to impact federal prisoners. So, which federal inmates only represent about 3% of the total U.S. prison population. So that's what's going on.
I have a question about that. Do the agencies think about going, or do they go out to the employees, the employers, and educate them about the importance of hiring people that are coming out of the system? Because that's the problem. They don't get hired.
That is a problem.
That's a huge
Housing's a
problem.
problem. Transportation's a problem.
Yeah.
Just re-entering society. I think some employers do, in fact, work with.
Some do, but
yeah.
so many more do not.
Oh, absolutely.
And so
there's
a lot of
there's
these-
a stigma attached to
Yeah, a lot of
those
these
trying to.
inmates that come out and try to get on the right and narrow end up going back doing the crime that got them locked up in the first place because they can't get a job.
Absolutely. And I think you find second chance initiatives taking place all across the country. In Connecticut is one state where the incarceration rate has dropped substantially over the years. Blacks are still 5 times across the board, across the country, more likely to be incarcerated than whites. Latinos face a similar statistic. But that's what you're finding across the country. And that's what this criminal reform bill, known as the First Step Act, is supposed to do, make a fairer justice system. But, the justice system is not mechanical. It's run by human beings. And, of course,
Right.
we know the problem with that. You understand? And there was this one other issue I wanted to address, Juan. The one down there with there's a very tragic story down in Alabama where that young black man, 21 years of age,
In the mall.
E.J.
In the mall.
Bradford was shot. Reminded me of the Jamel Robinson story coming out of the suburb of Chicago, where I guess down in Alabama, 2 teenagers were shot, and the police arrived on the scene. And the witnesses are saying they just opened up fire, and just shot him. They want to see the body camera because initially the police said he was involved. He was one of the shooters,
Right, that's
and
exactly what they said.
and they just smeared the man's name. He's in the U.S. Army. He was home on furlough, waiting to be deployed in Afghanistan, I believe. Family has a history of being involved in the U.S. military, and for all from what we're gathering, he was an outstanding young man, and his life was taken from him, in that brief moment.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that the problem that I see with that one in particular is how they tried to cover it up.
Right, right.
You know what I'm
Right.
saying?
It was a mistake. They made a mistake, and now they're smearing the young man's
Yes.
name. Let's say, oh, he pulled the gun, and and here you have this is Alabama. This is Ruby Red, Alabama. This is NRA supporters down there by the droves, and here's a black man who, even if he pulled the gun out or had a gun out for his own protection, let's just say, he winds up dead. Another good guy, quote unquote good guy, shot dead by the police under suspicious circumstances, and it really it just conjures up this story, this image of of Jamel Robinson down in Chicago facing the same thing, and so much pain that these families are facing,
And the
You
thing,
know-
yeah,
unnecessarily.
go ahead, Rasan.
I was gonna just interject in to say that these are the kind of issues and things that we've always been dealing with. The sweeping under the rug, to try to smear and cover up, whatever it is that may have happened, in account of a police officer or someone in high power doing something of injustice. These things are getting worse and worse. It's not like they're getting better. They're getting worse, and they're always happening in these designated areas.
Yeah, well, we see it now because of the videos and what have you, and
Right.
and you hear a lot more about it. But let's not lose sight of the fact we live in a very racist society, and whites have not taken ownership of their racism in general. Like men haven't taken ownership of our sexism.
Thank you.
But we live in a very racist society, and until whites come to terms, because that's what we have to come to terms with it. Like men have to come to terms with sexism, and blacks have to come to terms with our self-hatred. But until whites come to terms with their racism and stop passing this off as police training or we need more sensitivity training. No, you have to come to terms. You have to own the racism.
accountability.
Take accountability. In order for us to recognize, in order for this problem to be eradicated. And it won't be eradicated until that happens, until they say, yes, there is an issue. We don't see black people as we see ourselves. We do view black people in the negative. We do see black men in particular as dangerous, as criminals. We do see that. Own that.
I had someone who I know who's of high dignitary that said that it's not just the whites. This particular individual said it's blacks and whites.
In terms of what?
In terms of the differences, because of the constant throwing out there of us saying that this needs to happen, this needs to take place, a white saying this needs to happen, this needs to take place. I think that it's a common ground that we all need to come to. You know what I mean?
Well-
Because there's differences on both sides.
Yeah, but let's
Right?
keep it in its proper perspective, Rasan. I'm going to stop you right there because we have to be very clear about who perpetuates racism. I'm not owning racism. That's
Thank you.
not. I'm not going to own racism. I'll own my sexism and I'll own self-hatred because this is part of the socialization process. We have not been socialized to be racist. We might have been socialized to hate ourselves based on the information that's disseminated to us through Hollywood, through the educational system, through our own environment. But we're not socialized to look with disdain upon other people.
Which we do not.
You understand what I mean? So that's what we have to deal with. Don't burden me with someone else's burden. I'm willing to own what I have to own, but don't burden me with the task that you have before you have to deal with that. So whites have to deal with owning their racism. Whites have to own the fact that they've been socialized to think of us in a certain way.
As less than.
As less
Well,
than,
I
of course,
think-
and that's through television, that's through the
Magazines,
the pop
everything.
culture, so on and so forth.
Well,
Go ahead.
Well, the other piece about this is like, we also have a responsibility when we get into positions of power, right? And that is that, I find myself in that situation quite a few times in my career, right? Where, I have the power to hire, right? And so, in my mind, I was always looking at diversity, right? Like I wanted my staff to look like America, right? And so, at times I was accused of like just trying to look out for black men and black women, whereas before when I first got there wasn't no issue about that, right? It was because there weren't any, right? And so I think that we have to be when we put ourselves in that position, we know that people are gonna be coming after us because of that, right? Because they're looking at, okay, well, he's gonna look out for black people because he's black, right? So therefore he's gonna have more black folks working under him, so forth and so on. Whereas before that question was never raised, right? And so when we get put in those positions, we have to be careful because that's how they take us down, right? That's how we lose some jobs, right? And let me also add one more thing, right?
Sure.
You got to go a step further because this show is committed to pointing out whenever there is a disservice to our community, when there is racism involved, and we're gonna always do that, right? But the other part of it is that, for instance, when an officer goes to court, right? We have to be, even though it's in Mississippi, we have to still be aware of that case, and whatever we can do to make sure that write letters, whoever
We
get
have
in contact. You know
right.
what I'm saying?
We have social media now. Well,
Hey,
and we use,
exactly.
it upsets me so much the way we use social media. It's such, we use it in the most ignorant of ways. I mean, this is a network system that we should put to full use.
Yes.
You understand what I'm saying, Candy? I mean, we have
do.
access to something that, is like the greatest thing since sliced bread. We can mobilize, we can organize, we can do all kinds of things. You understand what I'm saying, Sabrina? With social media, and we use it for some of the dumbest things.
Absolutely.
You are
Selfies.
so correct.
Some of the dumbest things.
So how do you change that?
I
though,
think
is
it's
my
on the
question.
I think it's on the individual.
Well, we're having a conversation about
Yeah.
it now.
Right.
I think, yeah.
And people that are listening right now, like for instance, right? Like, don't let this case, the case in Chicago, go away.
Right.
We pointed it out today, right? But there's going to
follow it.
But there's going to be some follow up to this. Is the officer going to be,
Reprimanded.
arrested?
Right.
Is he going to be charged? Is he going to, go to court? What is going to happen, right? We have to stay on top of that, right? And continue to talk about it and continue to have people that are dealing with this case realize that we are looking at you.
Right.
We're not. We just didn't complain and leave it alone.
No,
Right.
we're paying attention and we want answers.
That's what we need to do. And to your point, exactly. The world has gotten smaller. You can be an activist in Connecticut for something that's happened in Chicago.
Absolutely.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Simple.
Absolutely.
Right?
We have to, and all I'm saying is, young people mimic adults. We have to show the way. Stop blaming young people. Stop talking about what they do. They're only following us. We have to set the example. We have to show them how best to utilize social media. They don't see us reading, so they don't want to read. They don't understand that the value of reading. You understand? We place emphasis on certain things, and so they place an emphasis on certain things. So we have to become more accountable. This is what I'm talking about when we talk about racism. We talk about all these other issues. We have to own the issues that impact us. We have to own the things that we're doing
That we contribute
wrong.
to, yeah.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. And so
agree.
I don't have time to worry about what other folks have to do. That's on them. You do that.
Right.
But Juan, we'll have something else next Tuesday. We got the issues coming to you.
Truth to Power with Michael Jefferson.
Yes, sir.
My brother, thank you so much for all you do, and thank you for coming every
Thank you,
weekend,
Mike.
man.
Thank you
enlightening
for
us on
having me.
cases that, in fact, folks might not know about in this town.
It's a pleasure.